guys, this is Dawn. We're here at the Atlanta Voice Studios with Miss Sharon Gay. How are you?
Great, thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, and I know that you're excited about running for mayor of Atlanta, and we just want to talk to you about how your campaign has been going.
Well, it's a first for me, as you probably know.
Yes.
I've never run for office before. I'm sort of like Shirley Franklin when she ran for mayor, had never run for office before.
Right.
She had worked in city government, as I have, and had worked in the private sector, sort of working with government and neighborhoods, as I have done. So this is my first time ever to run for office.
Right.
I would recommend not doing it during a global pandemic. That makes things a little more complicated.
For sure.
Because what I enjoy the most is actually getting out and meeting people and talking to people and hearing about what's on their mind, what they care about, what's important to their families, and it's harder to do now.
It really is. So for you, what has been the biggest thing that you've done to try to encourage Atlantans to really support you in moving Atlanta in the right direction?
Well, I've certainly, as you know, we have a lot of forums, and I try to go to every forum and sort of public event that anyone asks me to. That I've tried to do smaller gatherings just around town because people aren't necessarily comfortable going to a lot of large things.
Right.
And even some things people were going to have in their houses, now they're pulling back from that. So we're probably going to have to do some more virtual and Zoom type things.
Right.
But I'm really trying to get out all over the city. We've got something like 242 neighborhoods. I'd love to get to as many as I can because, as I said, really connecting with just people who are going about their day-to-day lives, and maybe not those of us who are constantly watching politics, is the most interesting and engaging part for me.
Right. So share with us just briefly what you are currently doing and what you have previously done, so that people are more familiar with your background.
Yeah, because I've mostly been behind the scenes. I recently stepped down as the Atlanta managing partner of the Atlantans law firm, which is the largest law firm in the world. It was a long-time Atlanta firm that merged. I was there for about 22 years. It merged, started out as Long Aldridge and Norman, and merged to become the large firm. But what I did at the firm, I still do a little bit, it's an extension of what I did when I was in public service, which is public policy work, and particularly around helping redo like environmental contaminated spaces, obsolete industrial buildings, really creating places, working with businesses and the city or the government and neighborhood leaders to create places where people like to go.
So you've been behind the scenes doing the groundwork because a lot of people don't know who those people are. So you're one of those people.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm not the one who has the grand vision. But I'm the one who helps make it happen.
Okay. Execution is key.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Usually I come up with a strategy. I figure out what it takes to get from here to there.
Okay.
And I come up with a strategy and I put together the pieces of the puzzle to execute the strategy to accomplish the goal. So whether it's Camp Creek Marketplace, which brought really the first new restaurants to that part of South Metro in years, to Atlantic Station, turning it from 138-acre environmental contamination into a town.
Literally.
Or Pont City Market, Madison Yards. Yeah, I do. That's what I'm. But I've done a lot of things up and down along the Beltline. I helped put the historic Fourth Ward Park together. And again, these were not my ideas, but what I tried to do is help people execute. And so really what I've helped do is help create places. Because ultimately those kinds of projects are about places and people. Places where people like to go, places for people to live, to work, to go out to dinner, to go to a movie, or it's places for entrepreneurs to start businesses, for people to get jobs. And so those are the kinds of things that I have worked on really all my career. I did spend some time in city government. I was Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Bill Campbell in his first term, and that was before and during the Olympics. Of course, it was a really exciting time to be in local government. We had to get the city ready for the Olympics and build the infrastructure.
That's a big event.
Yes.
And it's probably 10 times bigger than Super Bowl. Huh?
Well, yeah, it's sort of a Super Bowl every day for 17 days.
Wow.
And you have to move people all around town to all, it's 17 different places. So just getting the city physically ready was a big challenge. And we also began reinventing public housing. Renee Glover, who I think is a visionary leader, took over as executive director of the Atlanta Housing Authority and started working on a lot of the projects that really changed the way people who lived in public housing could live, and it really changed the city in a lot of ways.
So you bring her up because I know recently you have a commercial that's been shared on television where you state that you assisted in rebuilding Perry homes. Can you share with specifically what your role was in that, since you brought that up about the Atlanta Housing Authority and everything?
Yeah, and I worked on a number of things with them. You know, we picked that because it was sort of an example of the kinds of things I do. I couldn't, as you saw just now, you can't do it in 30 seconds.
Right, understood.
But it seems sort of a good example of the kinds of things I've done. So,
and it's something that, if we're going to be honest, you probably will have to look at as mayor, if elected, you know, around the city for affordable housing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've been really working on affordable housing since really started when I was in the mayor's office.
Wow.
So what we did for West Highlands, Perry Homes was large property, beautiful property, but the housing had been pushed way back from the street. You know, that was the way public housing was built, as though no one wanted it to be seen.
Right.
And so what Renee's vision was, and her development partner's vision was to build a much larger community where it was right up at the street. And so it was apartments and townhomes and single family homes and parks and public spaces. And in order to do that, we needed to build all new streets, all new sidewalks, all new sewer, clean up the landfill, close it, do all the things that you needed to do in order to build that actual community. And there was no public funding for that. The federal government pays for the buildings, but not for all that infrastructure.
Okay.
And so I had sort of helped create the use of, this gets really boring, but the use of...
No, we're interested. We want to know.
The use of tax allocation districts, which people may have heard people talk about TADs.
Yes,
a lot of people around the city have been on TAD advisory committees for the various ones. Of course, that's part of the way we pay for the Beltline. And what it does is you work with the city planners in the neighborhood to create this very comprehensive redevelopment plan for how the area would be redeveloped. And then the city creates this tax allocation district, and the county and the school board have to agree. And then the new property tax revenue that's created when the new project is built is captured and used to pay for that infrastructure. And so that's how the West Highlands streets and sidewalks and sewers were paid for. So I helped put together the team to draw up the redevelopment plan. The city planning staff wanted to include a much larger area, so we ran, all the way up to Moores Mill Shopping Center, which also got some TAD funding. And so there was a vision of how just the whole area could be redeveloped. So we created the redevelopment plan, created the tax allocation district, worked with the county and the school board to get their approval. Then we started working on the financing. The city issues bonds. And at the same time, the city was working on the Beltline TAD, had created the TAD to help pay for the Beltline. And someone challenged the use of the school portion of the taxes in the Beltline TAD. And literally, we were almost ready to issue the bonds for West Highland, and the Georgia Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. And the legislative session had already started. And so I quickly put an effort together and went over to the Capitol and helped lead the effort to get a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate to approve a constitutional amendment, which the voters approved in the fall of 2008. And then we had to go back and reenact the law, and so I led that effort as well. And so then that saved the financing structure not only for West Highlands, but for the Beltline. And East Side TAD, which is MLK Historic District, and lots of other TADs around town and around the region. And so then finally, after that, we were able to sell the bonds that help pay for that infrastructure.
That's amazing, and that's a great way to kind of educate our audience on how this works behind the scenes, because we hear when people talk about maybe not raising taxes or raising taxes for certain purposes, and tax allocation. That's very important for us to kind of like understand behind the scenes where it's going and why.
And it's a really valuable tool, because the state doesn't give local governments as many tools as some other states give their local governments. And so we've had to be very creative and intentional in Atlanta about how we use those tools. And in recent years, the TADs really haven't been used very strategically. And having done, I don't know, maybe 30 of those kinds of projects, I think I could bring a pretty sharp eye to how we use those incentives to accomplish the best vision for the city.
Wow, and that's a great way to kind of end our conversation. And thank you for just sharing that and just being open to really educating our audience on something that they probably knew nothing about. I promise you, because I learned a few things myself. Is there anything you want to speak on about your campaign and what you're looking forward to?
Yeah. I mean, well, and I think that the first thing is people, because I have never run for office, people might say, well, why now?
Yeah.
And the why now is very simply that I feel like our city is adrift, and I believe I have the right skills to help at this moment. You know, I love this city. I've lived here 42 years. It's my husband and I have made our lives here. It has been great to us, and I really feel that we're at a point where if we don't make the right choices and head in the right direction, we could lose some of what has made us special. And I am very concerned about that, particularly around income inequality. That has bothered me for some time now, how unequal our city is and how hard it is, depending on where your zip code, where you were born, how hard it is to move beyond those circumstances. And doing the kinds of projects I've done all these years, the kinds of things we just talked about, which involves bringing in business leaders and civic leaders and working with the government and the neighborhood and the churches and to pull all of our aspects of the city together to tackle these complex problems. You know, come up with have a vision, have a strategy, tackle it and execute is something that I've done my whole career, and I really think that's what the city needs right now.
All right, and you've heard it here first from the Atlanta Voice here with Sharon Gay. We'll be tuning in for more questions with her later.